The turkey was already cold by the time I finally sat down at the table. I had been standing by the window for 40 minutes, watching the driveway. Every time a pair of headlights swept across the curtains, my heart did that embarrassing little jump, the kind you can't stop even when you know better. But car after car kept going. None of them turned in. It was Thanksgiving. My dining room table was set for 7. I was the only one there. I want to be honest with you about something. I did not cry right away. I think I was too stunned to cry. I just stood there with my dish towel folded over my arm like I was still expecting someone to walk through that door, and I looked at the centerpiece I had driven 40 minutes to buy, a big ceramic pumpkin with dried eucalyptus around the base, and I thought, I ironed the tablecloth this morning. I actually ironed it. My name is Cecilia. I am 71 years old. I live alone in the house my late husband and I bought in 1987 in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. We raised 2 children in this house. We put a swing set in the backyard that is still there, rusting, because I have never quite been able to bring myself to take it down. My husband, Roy, passed away 4 years ago this past February. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. After Roy died, it was just me. My daughter, Gwen, lives in Denver. She is 43, works in pharmaceutical sales, and has a husband named Patrick and 2 kids I see maybe twice a year if I am lucky. My son, Mitchell, lives 22 minutes away from me. 22 minutes. I have timed it. He's 40 years old, runs some kind of online marketing business from home, and has a girlfriend named Ashley who I have met exactly 4 times. For Thanksgiving this year, I had invited both of them, their families, my neighbor Dottie, and my late husband's sister, Aunt June. 6 guests. I had been planning since October. I made Roy's mother's stuffing recipe, the one with the celery and the sausage and the fresh sage from the pot on my windowsill. I made sweet potatoes with the little marshmallows on top the way Gwen liked as a child, even though I think it tastes like dessert masquerading as a vegetable. I baked 2 pies. I set the table the night before with the good china we got as a wedding gift and almost never used. I wanted it to be beautiful. I wanted it to feel like something again. The first call came at noon, 2 hours before everyone was supposed to arrive. It was Gwen. She sounded rushed, the way she always sounds, like she is doing 3 things at once and calling me is the 4th. Mom, I am so sorry. Patrick's company flew us to Scottsdale last minute. It's a team retreat thing. They do it every year around the holidays. And this year it landed on Thanksgiving, I said. I know, Mom, I'm sorry. The kids are so upset. I heard noise in the background, what sounded like a pool. I told her it was fine. That is what you do. You say it's fine. The second call came at 12:30. It was Mitchell. His voice had that particular quality. It gets when he is about to tell me something he knows I won't like. A little too casual. A little too cheerful. Hey, so Ashley's parents kind of surprised us. They got a place up at Hocking Hills for the long weekend, like a cabin thing. The whole family's going up, Mitchell. I know, Mom, I know. But it was last minute and Ashley really wanted. And I figured you'd understand, since it's just me, I said. He paused. That's not what I meant. But it was what he meant. Aunt June called at 1 o'clock to say her sciatica had flared up and she could not make the drive. That one I believed. June is 82 and I would not want her on the highway in November anyway. Dottie called at 1:15. Her son had driven up from Cincinnati unannounced. I am so sorry, Cece, she said, and she really was. I could hear it. I'll come by Friday and we'll eat pie. I promise. Go be with your son, I told her. At 2 o'clock, I sat down at my dining room table with a single plate of food. Turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, a little of the cranberry sauce, and I ate alone in a room set for 7. I have eaten alone many times since Roy died. I am used to it in the ordinary sense. Tuesday night pasta alone, Friday night soup alone. That is just what my life is now, and I have made a kind of peace with it. But Thanksgiving alone is different. Thanksgiving is not a Tuesday. Thanksgiving is the one day a year when solitude stops being neutral and becomes something with an edge to it. I sat there with my good china and my iron tablecloth, and I thought about every Thanksgiving I had cooked in that kitchen. The year Gwen was 3 and knocked the gravy boat off the counter. The year Mitchell brought his first college girlfriend home, and she was vegetarian, and I had not known, and I scrambled to make something, anything, while Roy kept her distracted in the living room with old photo albums. The year Roy's father came for what turned out to be his last Thanksgiving, and after dinner we sat on the back porch even though it was cold. The two of us and Roy and his dad, and nobody said much. We just sat there, and it was enough. Those people were gone now. That life was gone. And my children, who I had given 30+ years of my life to feed and worry over and drive to school and sit up waiting for, my children had chosen other things. I did not finish my plate. I put the food away. I covered the dishes with plastic wrap and stacked them in the refrigerator. I washed the pots and the roasting pan. I took the good china off the table and washed each piece by hand the way you were supposed to, with the good china. Even though I was tired, even though my feet hurt, even though there was no reason to keep treating things carefully when there was no one to be careful for. And then I sat down in Roy's old chair, the green one in the living room that I have never reupholstered because it still smells like him when the heat comes on, and I let myself feel it. I cried for about 20 minutes. Not the dramatic kind, just the quiet, embarrassing kind where your face gets hot and you cry into a dish towel, and the dog looks at you with those confused, worried eyes that dogs have. My dog, Biscuit, he's a 9-year-old beagle, half-blind, very opinionated, came and put his head on my knee. I put my hand on his ear. After a while, I stopped. And something shifted. I have spent 4 years since Roy died, trying very hard not to be a burden, not to call too much, not to need too much, reminding myself that my children have their own lives, their own pressures, their own families, that it is not their job to fill every empty space I have. I have told myself this so many times I had started to believe it meant their behavior was acceptable. It does not mean that. There's a difference between not expecting your children to orbit your life and being left alone at a table you spent 2 weeks preparing. I got up from Roy's chair, went to the kitchen, found a notepad on the counter, the one with the sunflowers on it that my sister sent me years ago, and I started writing things down. Not out of anger, exactly. Anger is hot, and I was something colder than that. I was clear. I was, maybe for the first time in years, completely clear about what I was willing to accept and what I was not. The house was the first thing I wrote down. This house has 5 bedrooms. Roy and I bought it when we thought we'd fill it. We did fill it for a while. Now it is just me and Biscuit rattling around in it, and I am paying property taxes and a heating bill on rooms I never enter, and a yard I hire the neighbor's kid to mow because my knee has not been right since the fall I took 2 years ago. The house is worth somewhere around $400,000. It has been sitting here as a monument to a life that no longer exists in the shape it used to. I had been telling myself I was keeping it for the children, in case they needed it, in case the grandchildren wanted to visit and have a yard to run in, but the grandchildren do not visit. And my children do not visit. And my children do not visit. They call, sometimes. They text. Gwen sends me photos of the kids on their first days of school, and I love those photos, and I save every one of them, but they do not come. They do not sit at my table. I am 71 years old. I do not know how many years I have left, where I am mobile and healthy and capable of maintaining this house. I have been waiting to live differently until it felt like the right time. Sitting in my dining room alone on Thanksgiving, I understood that the right time was not going to announce itself. The next morning, I called my financial advisor, a woman named Patricia. No, I had known her since Roy was alive, and she had always been straight with me. If I sold the house, I said, what would I be looking at? We talked for an hour. Then I called a realtor I trusted. Then I called the senior community over on Bexley Road that I had driven past 100 times and never let myself stop to look at. The one with the garden plots and the little cafe in the lobby and the activities calendar posted in the window. I had always assumed it was not for me, that it was for people who had given up on something. I was wrong about what giving up looks like. The woman who answered at Bexley Gardens was named Kathleen. She was warm and unhurried, and she asked me questions like she actually wanted to know the answers. The one-bedroom units had a small patio. They allowed dogs under 30 pounds. There was a Friday evening social. There was a book club. There was a garden plot waiting list. but I could put my name down. Biscuit is 17 pounds. I put my name down on the wait list that same morning. December and January, I spent sorting through 40 years of accumulated life. That part was harder than I expected, and also more clarifying than I expected. You cannot go through 40 years of a life without seeing it clearly. Every drawer, every box, every shelf is a decision you made, a person you were, a moment you chose to preserve. I kept what mattered to me. Roy's watch, the quilt his mother made, the photo albums, my grandmother's cast iron skillet, the kids' old artwork, finger paintings, clay animals, a papier-mâché mask Gwen made in 4th grade that is frankly terrifying but that I love. I sold the furniture that was too big. I donated what I could. I threw away things I had been keeping out of guilt rather than love. In the closet of what had been Mitchell's room, I found a shoebox of old birthday cards. Cards from Roy. Cards from my sister who died of a stroke 8 years ago. Cards from my own mother who passed when Gwen was still in high school. I sat down on the floor of that empty room and I read every card in the box, and I let myself feel how much I had been loved in this life, and I let myself feel how much I had loved in return, and then I put the cards in my keep pile and I closed the box and I got back up off the floor. In February, I signed the listing agreement. The house sold in 9 days. In this market, that did not surprise me. What surprised me was how I felt watching the for sale sign go up. Not grief, exactly. Something closer to release. I closed on the house in April. I moved into Bexley Gardens on a Tuesday with the help of 2 men from the moving company who were patient with me when I changed my mind about where the bookshelf should go. Twice, my unit has a little patio that faces the garden. In the evenings, I sit out there with Biscuit and watch the light change over the flower beds, and I drink my tea, and I do not pretend that I am not lonely sometimes, because I am. Loneliness does not disappear because your circumstances change. But it is a different quality of loneliness now. It is the ordinary kind, the Tuesday kind, not the Thanksgiving kind. I have met people here. Dottie still comes for pie. There's a woman named Frances. No, I cannot use that name. There is a woman I have become friendly with, Bernadette. No, there is a woman named Virginia who moved in 2 months before I did and who grows tomatoes on her patio and drops them at my door with a little note that just says, "For you." There's a man named Arthur who leads the book club and who has read every novel Cormac McCarthy ever wrote and is very passionate about this. There is a Thursday morning walking group that goes around the pond twice and then gets coffee, and I go to that now every week. My life is smaller than it was, and also, somehow, more full. Now, I need to tell you about the other thing. The thing I have not said yet, because I wanted you to understand the whole picture before I got to it. A few weeks after Thanksgiving, in December, both Mitchell and Gwen called to check in. Separate calls, same week. Both of them warm, breezy, asking how I was doing, telling me about their lives. Neither of them mentioned Thanksgiving. Neither said, "I'm sorry I left you alone at that table." Mitchell mentioned that his lease was coming up and he'd been thinking about buying. Wasn't the market tough? Did I know what houses were going for? Gwen mentioned that the kids were going to need new computers for school next fall. Wasn't it something how expensive everything was? I listened to both of them. I was pleasant. I did not say the things I was thinking, but I got off those calls and I sat with something I had been putting off for months. Roy and I had wills drawn up years ago, and after he died, I had updated mine with our family attorney, a man named George who has been practicing in Columbus for 30 years and who knew Roy well. The will, as it stood, divided everything equally between Gwen and Mitchell, with provisions for the grandchildren's education. I called George in January. We met in his office on a Thursday afternoon, and I told him what I wanted to do. He listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, he asked me if I was sure. I told him I was sure. I am leaving the bulk of my estate, the proceeds from the house, my savings, Roy's retirement accounts that passed to me, to a fund that will be administered by the Ohio State University. Roy was an OSU alumnus. He loved that school with a particular devotion that I always found charming and a little excessive. The fund will provide scholarships for first-generation college students studying engineering, which is what Roy studied for as long as the money lasts. I am leaving Roy's watch to Arthur, who also attended OSU, because he is the kind of man Roy would have liked. I am leaving the cast iron skillet to Virginia, who will actually use it. I am leaving the photo albums to my children. All of them together in a box, because they are their history too, and I would not take that from them. I am leaving my children each a letter. I worked on those letters for 3 weeks. I am not going to tell you everything I wrote in them because some of it is private in a way that even this is not. But I will tell you the part that matters most, the part I want you to understand. I did not write those letters out of anger. I wrote them out of love, the honest kind, the kind that does not look away from hard things. I told Gwen and Mitchell that I loved them. I told them about the specific ways they made me proud over the years, moments I remembered that they probably don't. I told them about the choices I watched them make as adults and what those choices said to me about who they had become. And I told them about Thanksgiving. I told them that I was 71 years old and that I had stood at my window for 40 minutes watching a driveway that stayed empty, and that something changed in me that night that I wanted them to know about, because I thought they deserved the truth more than they deserved my politeness. I told them I understood they were busy. I told them I understood that their lives were full and complicated. And I told them that understanding something and finding it acceptable are two different things, and that I had spent too many years confusing the two. I told them I hoped they would find, with their own children, the thing I had been reaching for with them. I hoped they would understand it in time. Not too late, but in time. I have not told my children any of this yet. The will is signed and filed. They will find out when they need to. I thought about calling them, and then I thought, no. I have spent 40 years making myself available and convenient. These letters will say what I need to say when the time comes. That is enough. What I have decided, in the meantime, is to live. This spring, I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center 2 miles from Bexley Gardens. I have never painted anything in my life. I am not particularly talented, as it turns out. Virginia looked at my first piece and said, kindly, that it had a lot of energy. But I go every Tuesday morning and I paint badly and I laugh at my own mistakes and I come home with paint on my hands and I feel, in that specific way that surprised me the first time I felt it, genuinely okay. I planted tomatoes in my garden plot. They are not yet as good as Virginia's, but they are mine. I grew them from seeds I started on my kitchen windowsill in March, the same windowsill where I keep my herb pots, and watching them come up, that small green persistence, did something to me that I cannot fully explain. Biscuit goes to the dog run behind the building on Tuesday afternoons and has developed what I can only describe as a complicated rivalry with a Pomeranian named Duke. I enjoy watching this more than I probably should. I talk to Gwen every couple of weeks. I talk to Mitchell a little less often. They do not know yet what I have decided, and our conversations have the quality of conversations that don't quite reach the thing they're about. Maybe someday that will change. I am not holding my breath, but I am also not closing the door. Life is long. People surprise you sometimes. Roy surprised me plenty over the years in both directions, and he was the best person I have known. What I know is this. I am 71 years old, and I am not waiting anymore. I am not waiting for the right moment to live in a space that feels like mine. I am not waiting for my children to choose me before I choose myself. I am not waiting to take the watercolor class, to grow the tomatoes, to sit on the patio in the evening with my old half-blind dog and watch the light go golden over the garden and think, this is my life, and I am in it. Last Thursday evening, the walking group went around the pond as usual, and then we got coffee at the little cafe in the lobby, and Arthur brought a poem he wanted to share. He does this sometimes, pulls out a piece of paper from his shirt pocket, and it was a Mary Oliver poem. The one about being a bride, married to amazement, about taking the world into your arms. I know that poem. I have known it for years, but sitting there at that small table with my coffee and these people I had not known 8 months ago, hearing it read out loud in Arthur's careful voice, I felt it differently than I ever had before. This is the life I am living now. This is the one I chose. I've thought a lot about what it actually means to raise children, not the logistics of it, the driving and the scheduling and the lunches packed and the fevers managed, but the deeper thing underneath all of that. What are you actually trying to do when you raise a person? I think you are trying to give them enough love, enough example, enough of yourself that they grow into someone capable of giving it back. Not to you necessarily, to the world, to their own family someday, to whoever needs it. What I understand now, at 71, is that you can do everything right and still have it not turn out that way, and that understanding this is not the same as excusing it. Gwen and Mitchell did not end up the way they are because I failed them. I know that. I also know that the choices they have made, the years of half-presence, the excuses, the Thanksgiving that broke something open in me, those choices have consequences. Not because I decided to punish them, because that is simply how life works. What you put in is, eventually, what surrounds you. My children put distance in, and now there is distance. I do not think I am a perfect person or a perfect mother. I lost my temper more than I should have when they were teenagers. I leaned too hard on Roy sometimes, instead of leaning into the difficult conversations myself. I let things go unsaid for too long because saying them felt like conflict, and conflict felt like danger. Those are my failures. I own them. But here's what I also know. I showed up. Imperfectly, incompletely, but I showed up. I was there. For 30+ years I was there, and in the end, when I needed them to show up for me, just once, at a table I had spent 2 weeks preparing, they were not. The watercolor class I go to on Tuesday mornings has taught me something unexpected. When you are learning to paint, you make a mark, and then you have to respond to that mark. You cannot undo it. You can only keep going, keep responding, keep making the next mark, based on what is actually on the page, rather than what you wished you had put there. A good painting is a long conversation between what you intended and what you actually did. A life is the same way. I could spend whatever years I have left grieving the version of my family I thought I would have, or I can look clearly at what is actually on the page. Virginia's tomatoes at my door, Arthur's poems on Thursday mornings, Biscuit's complicated feelings about Duke the Pomeranian, and I can keep going from here. I can make the next mark. The hardest kind of courage is not the dramatic kind. It is the quiet kind. The kind where you sit in your late husband's green chair on Thanksgiving night, cry into a dish towel for 20 minutes, and then get up and write things down on a notepad with sunflowers on it. The kind where you call your lawyer, and you call your realtor, and you put your name on a waiting list for a garden plot, and you show up to a watercolor class where you are genuinely not very good and you do it anyway. That is the kind of courage I want to keep having. Not because anyone is watching, because I am still here, still alive, still capable of choosing what kind of woman I want to be in whatever time I have left. I grew tomatoes from seeds this year. I watched them push up through the soil on my kitchen windowsill in March, and I thought, there it is. That is the whole thing right there. You put something in the ground, you tend it, you wait, and if the conditions are right, if there is enough light, enough care, enough willingness to keep showing up even when nothing seems to be happening, something grows. I am still growing. That is what I know.